Senator Bernie Sanders is going out there and talking about how the Democratic Party can do better for the American people in terms of passing good, helpful public policy, but also in terms of running better candidates that people will actually want to vote for. So the Wrap reports that Bernie Sanders told CNN's Dana Bash this weekend that Harris lost the election due to the influence of, quote, very wealthy people. All right, let's be clear in my view, Sanders added. The current political system in the United States of America is broken and corrupt. Sanders clarified at the beginning of the segment that Harris is a, quote, friend of mine, but he immediately added she was heavily influenced by very wealthy people during her brief run. Harris was named the Democratic candidate for president only a handful of months before the election. Quote, how do you run for president and not develop a strong agenda which speaks to the economic crises facing working families? Sanders asked. You have more income and wealth inequality today than we've ever had. You have 60% of our people living paycheck to paycheck. You've got a healthcare system which is broken and dysfunctional. And despite spending so much, we're the only major country not to guarantee healthcare to all people. After Bash interjected that Harris spoke about affordability, Sanders demurred and said he didn't want to rehash that campaign, but does see it as a useful guide for Democrats in the future. Amen. Amen. You got to reject this idea that, we can just let corporations and wealthy donors control our campaigns, buy our campaigns. Just because Kamala Harris is a better candidate than Trump, by far, actually, does not mean that it's okay for her to just take corporate donations and, be a tool for the wealthy. And I imagine that she could have campaigned in a more progressive manner. She would have had less inhibition about taking strong stances on some of these issues, economic issues, environmental issues, if she was not taking as much money from wealthy people. That just is a good rule of thumb, generally speaking. Both Democrats and especially Republicans, this applies to. So yeah, if you're genuinely a centrist and you have centrist political views and you don't take, donations from corporations and wealthy people, you only take small dollar donations, that's one thing. You're entitled to your centrist opinions. You're entitled to not be a quote unquote radical on issues like economics, healthcare, climate change. But you're not really helping the progressive cause. You're just saying what your true authentic thoughts are. And that's totally fine. At least you're not bought and sold. But if you're someone who it could have been a progressive, but you're not because corporations are basically telling you not to and you need their money, that's concerning. That's concerning. And it inhibits your authenticity. But I think the clue to Democratic victories, Sanders said, is to understand that you got to stand unequivocally with the working class of this country. You need an agenda that speaks to the needs of working people. Is it a radical idea that we join every other major country and guarantee health care to all people? Is that a radical idea? You tell me how many people are talking about that. Is it a radical idea to say that we've got to raise the minimum wage to $17 an hour? Harris's campaign was dissected in the days and weeks that followed Trump's election night victory. Quote, I think if this campaign is reducible to one moment, we are in a 65% wrong track country, James Carville said on November 10th. James Carville ended up kind of conceding that Bernie was right on some things. Like, just don't take the money from the corporate donors. Just run a campaign where you talk about the needs of the working people. And in some ways, I think it was not just the wealthy donors, although it was indirectly them in this instance too, but Joe Biden inhibited Kamala Harris. There was that quote, I think, like, no daylight, no daylight between me and you. You need to say I'm right about everything, that I did everything right, and that you would absolutely, positively not have done anything differently. And so when Kamala Harris said in that interview she wouldn't have done anything differently from Joe Biden, people took her at her word for it, actually. People don't usually take politicians at their word for it, but they took her at her word for it, and they went and didn't feel very motivated to vote for her because it's like, oh, wow, so the election basically still is Biden versus Trump. Just we've got a younger candidate who is more coherent and doesn't say stuff like, we finally beat Medicare. So yeah, let me know what you think about this in the comments below. I know it gets a little tired just saying, oh yeah, the problem is, big money in politics and that's that. But that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there's plenty more problems. I'm saying there's sort of an authenticity problem. I'm saying there's a problem with being the incumbent, at least in this day and age, this tumultuous time period we're in, where, we had 2016 and then we had 2020 with the COVID pandemic. We had 2024 with, the price surges thanks to the pandemic. So it is rough. It is rough for incumbents out there. And incumbents across the whole globe basically took a massive butt kicking as a result of just them being incumbents during this COVID era or the just post-COVID era. So yeah, Harris kind of did have an uphill battle, as we're growing to realize, but also she could have done things better. And I hope that the Democratic nominee in 2028 is someone who is more adverse to corporations, someone who is more adverse to big money donors. But, we can only hope so much. A lot of them kind of just feel like, okay, I need to do it. There are some who are actually, less big money dependent, and they're genuinely centrist too. As I said, you can be a centrist and not take corporate money. Usually, though, it's the corporate money that makes them move to the center politically, because they're like, oh, shoot, I don't want to upset private health insurance companies. My God, if I were to promote universal health care, that would really piss them off. They're my donors. I can't lose that funding. I need that funding to have my big, beautiful billboards down on Main Street. No way. So, yeah, they're scared to stake out some more aggressive stances. And Bernie Sanders is one of the few senators who says, no, I'm just going to take small dollar donations. So I give him a lot of credit for that. I don't agree with him on every issue. I don't agree with any senator on every issue. But if you're actually going to go in there and be like, here's what I think, and rest assured that it is actually what I think, not what these corporations think, then I give major props to you. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you for watching. This is The More Is the Merrier. Like, comment, or subscribe to the channel, and I look forward to speaking to you in my next video.